It is safe to say that the original release of Total War Pharaoh was an overall disappointing experience. With a mixed overall reception of 64% on Steam, Total War Pharaoh left a lot to be desired and felt more of a saga game than a fully fledged historical title. Heck, I tried to review the game initially on launch, but I had zero energy to do so, as I found it incredibly boring and overall lacking. To much of the community's surprise, Creative Assembly completely course corrected with a huge update called Dynasties, which added 168 new settlements, 95 new factions with 39 of them playable, and a price cut of $60 to $40. The last one was really surprising, with the removal of the Royal and Ultimate editions to have only one purchase. Even though I was a bit burned out at launch, I finally decided to give this game another try and see if Total War Pharaoh is finally worth playing. So when you start a game, there are many more factions now than before to choose from. Specifically, there are 14 major factions along with 25 minor factions. Considering how the original launch had only a measly 8 factions to play as, this is a much appreciated improvement. The biggest difference from major and minor factions is that major factions have unique mechanics specific to them that may not be available to minor factions. Because I really wanted to highlight the difference of them, we will be looking at 2 factions today. For my major faction, I chose the friendly looking sea person in Walwates of the Peliset and the Damascus to create the Damascus Steel Empire before steel is even invented. There's also a crap ton of modifiers you can change from your campaign, which is appreciated and reminds me of a Three Kingdoms or Nobunaga's Ambitions title. I kept everything at the default values here, but I will definitely be messing with this in future playthroughs. As expected, after choosing your faction, you'll get a cutscene to help set the tone of the Bronze Age collapse and what should be expected. Honestly, it's incredibly corny and comical at certain points, although the ending montage is an awesome highlight of the various factions you can interact with. Starting out with Walwates and Damascus, I am at war with at least one faction, giving me an obvious route to expand in. Walwates start out as a horde faction with many of the horde mechanics we have come to see in prior Total Wars. You're basically both an army and a settlement at the same time, with both the risks and benefits each will provide. While I can settle down with Walwates, that is not my initial goal, as I want to burn everything to the ground at first. For Damascus, I am settled as expected and will focus more on natural expansion with them to create a Damascus empire. Damascus also has the harder start, warring with a major faction named Ursu, who is led by the very dangerous Ursu. Both will lead to battle right away, which we will get into right now. Bronze Age warfare is something that was tackled in Creative Assembly Sophia's past title with Troy. Ultimately, I wasn't a big fan of the combat in that game, although I did like the various mythical units you can play as. The Amazons DLC was also pretty fun, using the unique Amazonian roster and the warpath system. For the battles in Pharaoh, most of the look and feel is maintained. You'll be fighting with a lot of light units at first, with slingers and chariots most likely being a part of your army. Thankfully, there is more diversity in the unit roster, with camels even making an appearance to help liven things up. As mentioned prior, chariots are a huge part of the battlefield and probably something you would want to grab as soon as possible. Chariots are both overpowered and underpowered in my opinion. On one hand, they absolutely decimate any ranged unit they come in contact with. Rear charges are also absolutely brutal when set up properly. On the other hand, they are incredibly fragile and can be taken out very quickly with a handful of slingers. If you have a skirmisher, you can use their ability that reduces the chariot speed by a huge chunk, making them absolutely useless. The AI knows this as well and tend to overcommit to any chariot you have, even if they put themselves in harm's way. One thing I really like is the addition of ranged stances. In past Total Wars, units will either shoot their bows and throw their stones in the best arc they find possible. This can still be done if you keep the shot type to mixed. While I usually keep it like this for long range encounters, I found this to be much more effective to switch to direct shots once the enemy is close. Instead of arcing their shots, your archers and slingers will shoot directly ahead of them, which is incredibly lethal. Unfortunately, there seems to be a huge lack of general abilities compared to other Total Wars, but we will get into the generals later. Siege battles are also here, and they are probably the most boring. To be fair, I enjoy the actual art of sieging, as you can now take down walls as one of the options. Ladders are also now separate and don't just spawn right away. You'll need to build your ladders, towers, and ramps if you want to attack outside of specific circumstances. Since there are a lack of catapults and ballistia at the time, siege warfare is pretty basic. I can't really blame Creative Assembly on this, as they are limited to the time period, but it is something to keep in mind. I mainly just auto-resolve these battles or try to force the enemy to sally forth themselves. Honestly, I just auto-resolve most battles as I find them mostly to be lacking. Despite the lethality of chariots, I don't find them to be particularly fun to use compared to heavy cavalry of other games. While you can find some cavalry to recruit in certain areas of the map, you may not get a chance to recruit them depending on your chosen faction. Most battles revolve around infantry looking up and using your ranged attacks to either flank them or pick off the other ranged troopers. Again, I don't think this is Creative Assembly's fault, as the Bronze Age was very chariot focused with not much else going on. So I figured with this game having so much focus on the sea peoples, there would be some naval battles to help spice things up. Unfortunately, there are no naval battles to speak of. At this point, it seems that Thrones of Britannia will be the final game to feature any sort of naval battles. It's a shame, since it seemed that Creative Assembly was getting the hang of it, but just doesn't seem to be worth the development time at this point. I'm guessing Bronze Age naval warfare would be kind of boring, as it mainly just is boarding parties and arrows, but I still think it would have been interesting to explore. I kind of miss building up a navy and going pirate hunting with my ramming ships. With all these battles you'll experience, your general will level up and you can increase one of 3 attributes: presence, fortitude, and ardor. Right off the bat, this is a huge step down to the elaborate skill trees of the past. When you reach a certain level and attribute point, you can select a title and apply it to your character. Each title gives bonuses such as an immunity to certain attrition or even increased movement range. What I do like, however, is that you can customize your bodyguard depending on the equipped ancillaries. You can make something like a heavily armored spear and shield unit or a bow chariot unit. It's a great way to supplement your army with a specific elite unit. Now let's get back to the campaign. Once you reach turn 9, you can select your path to power, which ultimately determines where you want to go with your campaign. For my Walwate's campaign, I chose the path of the Marauder, as I wanted to continue to burn and pillage everything that was in my way. This path allowed me to gain domination and spend those points to convince opposing units to join me during battle, and even convince a province to stand down. This was perfect for my playthrough, so that is what I chose. For Damascus, I wanted to wait a little bit, as I wanted to join one of the 4 royal courts and see what I can do there. As I was pushing south, I found myself fascinated with Egypt and decided to join their royal court once I had an Egyptian sacred land. In this court, I quickly took Supreme Commander position and got access to some elite soldiers to recruit. I really enjoy this political system, although it seemed like a lot of factions weren't very involved in the court system. We had Tarset as the Pharaoh for quite a long time despite her old age, although nobody else seemed to take up the other positions for some reason. Not sure if that's a bug or a design intention, but this needs to be looked at. My personal favorite feature about joining a royal court is the ability to choose an ancient legacy. For Egypt, there are 4 unique ones here, each representing a specific person in either history or myth. Each offers their own unique mechanics to help you on your own playstyle. For Damascus, I decided to choose 810, as that combines the benefits of 2 gods into one. Since I know quite a few gods to the various cultures, I decided to combine the Egyptian god Osiris and the Canaanite god Yam to get the benefits of both worlds. This allows my general to take part in reduced upkeep along with increased troop replenishment. And my apologies, I completely forgot to talk about the religion system in this game. At first, you will only have one deity that your faction is dedicated to, but can research technologies to have up to 3. You can build shrines and temples to increase your favor and rise up to higher tiers. Once you reach tier 2, you can dedicate a general to that god, giving them bonuses in battle and in the campaign map. The highest tier you can reach is 3, so that is pretty easy to max them out. I like the religious system in this game, and I appreciate that favor doesn't drop like it did in Troy. I hear a lot of people talk about how hard it is to raise food and how the economy is incredibly unbalanced in normal settings. Personally, I disagree with that, as I never found myself in a dire situation. The Bronze Age was known for having extensive trade between each other. Nations that were dominant in one resource or another would trade with another one. That system basically applies here, meaning you would want to corner the market with one resource and trade it for what you need. As the Damascus Empire, I already had a gold mine to begin with, meaning I could trade gold for food, stone, wood, and bronze if needed. I was always able to find a willing trade partner and even set up some long-term agreements to keep the flow going. In Troy, I found this system to be lacking, but it seems to make a ton more sense here with all the different factions and cultures set up trade agreements to help keep the peace. The family tree is also back, although it is very stripped down and streamlined compared to other Total Wars. All you can really do here is arrange a marriage, pick your heir, get a divorce, and that's about it. Diplomatic marriages are also a thing that can be used to get a bit of leverage. You'll want to marry quickly as you'll often be the only member of your dynasty. If I had one major gripe with the campaign, it would be the poor AI. Once again, there's a heavy anti-player bias despite the location of some of these factions. Don't be surprised if a faction halfway across the map decides to land at your location, despite them being surrounded by enemies themselves. This happens far too often and is just not fun to experience. I understand factions declaring war on Walwates as he is a sea person, but Damascus is just the Canaanite faction. I found the best ways to prevent wars being declared on you is to become a vassal and serve under them. This may put you in wars you don't want to be in, but dramatically reduces the amount of AI wars declared on you. The technical polish, unfortunately, is underwhelming at best. While most of the time playing has been bug-free, I ran into quite a few crashes to the desktop, which seemed to be completely independent on how long I was playing for. Even though there was a patch recently to address some bug fixes, I still experienced crashes at most random of times. Loading times are also abysmal, and this is with a 7900X3D and an NVMe SSD. I can't even fathom how slow this would be on weaker hardware. Overall though, Total War Pharaoh is finally in a great place, and I'm happy to recommend it. The campaign mechanics are a lot of fun to play with, the amount of replayability is huge, and the various legacies give the game its own unique flavor. It's also one hell of a value at just $40. Unfortunately, the campaign AI is once again bad, the battles aren't as enjoyable compared to other Total Wars, and there are still stability issues and bugs present. Even though the Bronze Age isn't my favorite time period to explore, I'm still glad to see historical Total War games being released. I know the standard is to say that Medieval 3 is next, but who knows honestly at this point. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Shogun 3 was announced or Three Kingdoms 2. Personally, if Creative Assembly only wants to focus on unexplored time periods, Pike and Shot and the Age of Discovery would be a very interesting setting. Only time will tell to see what is next in store, but my confidence has been fully restored. Thank you all for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.